Now, we wanted to, before we have this presentation, we wanted to have that general discussion on the previous set of sessions. So I don't want to deprive us of an opportunity to talk about those issues. So if I could begin to get people who want to make an intervention on the presentations. Yes, in the back here. Microphone over here, please. You on?
Yes. I was quite pleased to see quite some presentations about the microdata linking, because I think that is really a big step forward. It's also a necessary step forward, because it's the only way we can show all facets of the economy. I would like to quote Nadim again, it's like we have disconnected statistics to interpret an interconnected economy. And using that microdata linking, you can get from like ownership to traders through wages of individual people. Now, that can answer many, many questions from outside. And of course, the big problem is how to find the resources. Well, at Statistics Netherlands, we had quite some experience, also due to the hard work of Fabienne Fortenier and other colleagues. And one of our ways to find those resources was to do projects, because for example, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs had so many questions, and well, they had to pay, of course. And this was a way to get forward, not only to their questions, but also to build some statistical infrastructure. Thank you.
Very good. Good observation. Gary. Oh, could I have the panelists who were on the last session, they put up the new names. I didn't mean to eject people. I just noticed that. I'm going, oh, okay.
So I have
Luis and Ronald. I'm not going to answer these questions.
So I have a question about how the change of ownership principle that was emphasized in the IMF presentation, but relates to the definition of manufacturing services. In particular, how it relates to different kinds of global supply chains that we've discussed over the last couple of days. For me, the clearest example of manufacturing services is related to the outward processing trade, or the maquila type example in Mexico, where a manufacturer supplies a set of parts to a company just responsible for assembly, who re-exports it. So the ownership was in that initial manufacturer, and the contracting organization is just providing labor for assembly. But that system phased out that's part of a kind of a producer-driven chain. If we look at the way global trade has evolved over the last 30 years, in most cases, the companies that are doing the international subcontracting with overseas suppliers aren't supplying the parts. The retailers, the brands, supermarkets, it's all international specification subcontracting, where the suppliers overseas, it seems to me, are the ones who have to pull together all those inputs, and the ownership is really on the supplier side. So if we think in sort of governance structure terms, and the OPT or maquiladora model, it's a producer-driven chain, and ownership and control resides with that lead firm. But in the international subcontracting buyer-driven chain, control resides with the Apples or the Nikes or the Walmarts, but it seems to me ownership is on the other side of the supply chain. So the question is, are all those buyer-driven transactions considered manufacturing services? Comes back to that kind of who's the factory-less goods producer. It just seems like there is a change of ownership when you get into current global production systems, because all the parts have to be supplied by the contract manufacturer overseas. So I'm just curious whether both are being lumped together in what's called manufacturing services from a statistical point of view, or whether the buyer-driven international subcontracting is treated differently.
Over here, Michael.
I just really, Gary got in ahead of me to some extent, but my focus is really on the producer-driven aspect of the goods for processing. And I think in the discussion, in the presentation, there was an emphasis on the fact that goods were going abroad for processing and coming back to the same economy, which is a very old argument about goods for processing. And in fact, they are part of global production chains and global value chains, obviously. And in general, they go to a third country once the contract manufacturer has finished his job. So I think we should emphasize that feature of the activity, that it's very much a part of the typologies or the schematic we have on global production. The second thing I just wanted to say is that the linking obviously ties in neatly with that, what Ronald said about how you actually deal with this problem to identify the exports that you now have to include in your statistics that are going from, say for Ireland, going from France to Germany or somewhere, that you have to actually identify those exports and include them in because they're not in your trade data. And this is a really a big challenge for compilers. We are dealing with that at the moment. The way we deal with it is really, we have to use our large cases unit, because some of the linking that's required is so extensive and so detailed that to do it for all enterprises that in our economy is just probably too big a challenge and too much of a resource problem. But having said that, we have to go beyond these large cases. We have had to, in our most recent compilations, we had to go to the 200 largest companies to see the incidences of processing type arrangements where we had to include these exports into our national accounts and balance of payments exports. That's all I want to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Anything else? Okay, I had perhaps an observation to add from the chair, which is that it's about the linking in general, which is the focus here has mainly been on the value of the linking in the sense that you're able to take one set of data, match it up with another, and get characteristics that you might have had to go out and get a new survey on. I know, for example, in the United States, many years ago, they did a linkage of their corporate foreign direct investment statistics with the establishment-based statistics, and were able to go, as policymakers wanted, from a limited set of industry classifications of about 100 to over 600 detailed industry classifications, and then be able to put characteristics on those individual firm level data. And I won't say that was costless. It cost about $3 million to do that. So all this linking is efficient relative to an average survey, which might cost you in the United States $20 million to 25 to mount. So it's not without cost, but it is a big cost savings if you decide you have to go ahead by using that existing data. So that's one thing I just wanted to underline. The second one is, having participated in these kinds of matches, there are significant benefits, and we've said this in general, but more specifically here, in terms of improving your core data. When you do those matches, you often find significant problems in your core data you were unaware was there. And that was a very significant side benefit that at least as I went into these, I was not expecting to find. But that was a big benefit we had, which is sort of intangible perhaps, but important. And useful to think about as we think about how do we do all this work within basically existing or smaller resources. So I just wanted to make that observation. Okay, can the panelists respond to any of those questions you wish to or think are relevant?
We're looking at Thomas.
Well, I just maybe react on the issue of resources that has been raised by Oscar from the Statistics Netherlands. Well, I already mentioned on my presentation the fact that microdata linking approaches are a good solution, a good way forward, but obviously they are not with a zero cost, let's say. I mean, there are resources and there are implications in terms of having to put real resources there. So in the European context, we have tried so far to give some financing and some of this kind of resources to our countries, but I fully agree with him on the fact that if the users of data are coming with new requests, new needs, well justified. I mean, I don't say that they are not really justified. They need also to make them understand that this has to be associated with certain resources. Otherwise, I mean, we may reach a certain limit in the things we can do. Thank you.
Thank you, and thanks for the question. I think as we saw on Monday in one of the presentations, there are various different types of international manufacturing processes. Our apparent focus on manufacturing services is, and I say apparent, is we seem to focus more on that more than any of the others, is for the basic reason that it's just a new category of the balance of payment statistics. It does not imply that all the international manufacturing processes actually, we try to fit all of these into manufacturing services. Manufacturing services are really very specific in the broader context. In terms of the change of ownership, that has always been an issue, change of economic ownership. Legal ownership is pretty simple, it's pretty straightforward, but it's not useful for macroeconomic statistics. When you get into change of ownership principles, you get into a much more complex issue, looking at risks and benefits and all these kinds of things, which may not necessarily be straightforward. So I take your point, there are the issues, but again, it all depends on whether you have these specific conditions being met that we would classify them as manufacturing services. If not, it could be classified as international trade or nothing at all, not an international transaction. So it all depends on what takes place, or whether that change of ownership takes place, what kind of relationship there is between the manufacturer and the owner of the goods, and so forth. But we consider it's not a straightforward process. As I said, we seem to focus on it because it's a new category, but we're not implying that all international manufacturing arrangements should fit into this specific manufacturing services box. And you brought up a good point about the oversimplification. Yes, in a sense, it's an oversimplification of what actually happens. And you quite correctly point out a lot of the trade is actually third countries. The goods are sent from the economy of the processor to third countries, and in many cases do not really return to the country of the owner of the goods because it's been done for international trade and not necessarily to satisfy a domestic need. So that two-country presentation, it's an oversimplification that we presented in the slide, and admittedly in the manual as well. And it really poses challenges for us, as you would have seen from how we attempt to convert the data. There is so much that is missing from there. But it's a process.
I either missed or have a late intervention from the United States here. Sally?
Thanks. I just wanted to follow up on some of these good for processing issues. There's still issues to be addressed in terms of this economic ownership distinction as far as the BPM 6 and goods for processing is considered, that would rule out including some merchandise exports in the balance of payment statistics, yet at the same time the FAT statistics are still calling for measuring trade between parent and affiliates as being part of trade, some kind of trade statistics. So those are issues that are known amongst the compilers and the people who work in this area, but not fully resolved. And then there's the Task Force on Global Production working on this question of that export to third parties, and that being considered the actual process export then becomes an export from the United States. So it doesn't disappear. Ideally, it should be counted once it is exported as an export from the United States. That's right, Patrick, right? Got that right. But anyway, these are thorny issues, no doubt, that we're dealing with. But there's an awareness of these loose ends, as it were.
Thank you. Okay, so where were we? Yeah. Go. Oh, please.
Yeah, so for me, just in a broader context, I'm not going into in any of the details of the discussion here, but what it also shows to me when I heard Gary making the remark is that there is a lot of communication necessary around these issues, because it's already difficult within the statistical community to get this teased out and But then for the broader research or even business community, it gets very complicated. And I think we should make that as one of the fields of work which you should not forget to translate this. So that was the point I want to make.
Okay. Okay, if we're finished with that topic, then we'll move on to this presentation by Norihiko Yamano. Yeah, thank you. And then after that presentation is done, we'll bring up the panel discussion for the wrap-up.
Okay, thank you everybody. My name is Norihiko Yamano from OECD Directorate for Science, Technology and Innovation. Today I would like to introduce the role of this great OECD-WTO trading value-added project, especially focused on the how to estimate the TiVA indicators using the currently available data sources. Of course, there are many issues, so we have to explain in the more details in how to estimate, come up with the numbers. Okay. So anyway, so this is the outline. ICIO, we call it Inter-Country Input-Output Database. It is a core model to estimate trading value-added indicators. But we need a specific type of inter-country input-output system, which might be slightly different from the academic literature, which has been there for many years, even 50 to 60 years ago. There was a sort of inter-regional input-output system, which is proposed by Leonchev. But when we estimate this type of trade balance or trade forecast indicators, we have to have a new type of inter-country input system. And then what we need is, and what we get is different, very different. So I would first start with the ideal statistics. We need to estimate the database, and then goes to the reasons why there are some discrepancies, asymmetries, and unharmonized reported statistics. As Ron said, it's not errors by the National Statistical Office submit. It's just differences in the definitions, and so we have to, as an analyst, we have to harmonize a concept as much as possible to come up with the final numbers. And then I little bit discuss about our methodology we use to harmonize the data and to create the indicators, but it's a little bit in here. And then I conclude with our wish list in terms of a short time so that we can keep producing these type of indicators for the countries. Okay, so this ICIO, inter-country input-output table, is really useful for many policy areas. Of course, we can estimate that trade forecast policy issues, trading value-added and global value chain indicators are mostly coming from this database. Then we can also focus on domestic side, like foreign contents in the consumption and exports. And also, we can also discuss about the jobs sustained by foreign demand, or even environmental analysis like carbon emissions embodied in trade. So those are, I think, the most widely used policy areas of this type of database. So this is how the table or the model looks like. It's maybe familiar to you because this type of format has been there for years. So it just tries to connect each country's industrial activities to other countries' industrial activities. And then there is a final demand sections, and it also has a trade within there, and output. The value added also coming from this table. And in next month already, we will have a release of this database with TiVA indicators. We have a 34 industry classification in the ISIC revision 3 based one. But we aim to convert the ISIC revision 4 based industry so that this 34 industry list is sort of a common list. In the future time, we will easily switch. We will have 61 individual countries and the rest of the world economies included. So that we can have some regional aggregate indicators as well, like OECD economies, BRICS, G20, of course, European, NAFTA, or Asian countries. We can have those countries, region aggregate numbers as well. And the coverage for the year is from 1995 to 2011, but we have to note that 2011 data is really like our first preliminary result because countries will submit a lot of data sources for 2011 in coming years. So it will be our first estimate. And then the format is in the industry by industry type analysis, and it will be in the basic price structure, so that it is easily comparable across countries, and it is easily linked with other industrial data like carbon emissions and the employment data. Okay, so how do we estimate this number? First, of course, we have to collect the data from national data sources and harmonize data, and sometimes we have to fill the gaps. We have to actually collect the data for 212 economies. So our target economies are 61 countries, but actually we try to collect all the data sources so that we will have better figures for the rest of the world economic structures. And then, of course, there are some missing data, filling gap. We have to fill the gaps for even value-added and outputs are not all available for all years for all countries. And then, of course, we will need to have input-output use table or SUTs and the bilateral trading goods and services, of course. And then we have to do some numerical adjustment to solve the asymmetry issues, and the bilateral trade coefficients will be finally given from the our team. And then global use table or inter-country supply use table will be estimated to estimate the inter-country input system. And then we don't really need to underestimate, the time required to create the indicators and how to disseminate these complex indicators to the public. We take a lot of time to design the website or design the indicators so that we can maximize the visibility of this OECD-WTO TiVA indicators in the world. So that that's a basic flows we take to estimate the flows. But our approach is basically it's not only our approach; it's an accumulation of the history of this type of work in the academic field and the official field. To estimate the TiVA type analysis, we need, as I said, a special type of maybe inter-country input system. We have to really use the official figures so that countries can recognize the numbers we see in the trade balances in the official figures and our numbers. And also, we won't have this in a long-term analysis. It's not a one-shot analysis. It means that we have to have it sustainable way. So it's usually easier to do with official figures rather than doing the one-off request for this, let's say, like it's difficult to sustain the unofficial or unpublished confidential data. So, and then another important thing in this project is we have to benchmark to the national accounts figures. So that's what we see in the exports, imports, or consumption, value added. All of them are basically linked to the national accounts concept. So sometimes what we observe in the raw data from the SUTs or input-output tables, the definitions of exports and imports are slightly different country by country. But fortunately, in the national account system, it is basically same. So that's our starting point as a total sector. And then we estimate the rest of the world figures, which is about 5% GDP, 10% trade figures, so that we can close the world economy in a nice way, so that we will have a complete figures of our TiVA indicators for the our target countries. Okay, so what we need for ideal case, we need to have a purchaser's price and basic price in the input-output system, because we want to harmonize the national accounts, which is in a purchaser's price, so it's one important thing. And then domestic and import table should be separated. We have to have enough sectoral detail for each country to have a common aggregate list, which is our 34 industry list. And then it has to be compatible with the balance of payment or national accounts, at least in terms of the definitions. Like some countries are publishing the different way of non-resident expenditure activities. So that's definition of output value added in basic price, and trade has to be defined in this way. Trade has to be, exports must be a sum of the expenditure by non-residents in domestic and foreign territories, and imports is the same other way. Well, so that's the format of our national input of database in the ideal way. It will be in the website, so you can check this latest days. And for the trade statistics, we have more issues as we discussed in this conference. It has to be bilaterally consistent, mirror trade. And CIF and FOB margins are also important information, because it can be used as to breach the CIF margin embodied in the goods, can be transported to the imported service activities from transporting and insurance industry in the partner, or third countries activities. And then it has to be really complete. As you know, trading services statistics, there are a lot of missing flows or unreported numbers, so we have to really have a complete figures from there. And then another important thing is the re-exports and re-imports by origin and destination, ideally for all countries preferred. We have some issues, known issues for like Netherlands, Hong Kong, China, and also like Hong Kong has a function of a trade hub for a Chinese manufacturing system, so we can observe a lot of re-imports, China, Hong Kong, China flows a lot in the Hong Kong's statistics. So that we have to use those informations to adjust the final and the destination and the two origin countries in our estimate. Well, I have a lot of slides, but I can really go to what the key messages we would like to address here. So the general data issues we found in the data sources is the national input, output, and supply use tables are not sometimes completely harmonized with the national accounts figures. And then we have to convert the price. Price has issues on basic price, purchaser's price issues, and also in terms of traded CIF and FOB differences. And of course, sometimes we have breaking sheets, like what we see in the time series comparability, that's one issue. Sometimes we have a breaking sheets, even in the very nicely harmonize our Eurostat framework, we see some issues there when we use it for our analysis. So there are some activities within OECD framework in the statistical directorate to solve this type of issues in the various working groups and committees with our partner agencies and countries. Right. So, so basically I can really need to skip, I think, for the time. So that's an issue. Another issue is one country like where we have a lot of processing trade, like in case of Costa Rica, we will see a huge difference, which is not really just CIF of margin. Like for in case of China to Costa Rica, 12 times more numbers are reported in Chinese side, and that's not really what we want in our database. So our methodology basically is to first we have to estimate the gaps which observed in the original sources and changing the original classification, which is in HS for the goods and EBOBs for the trade in services, to our CPA type ISIC classification. And then we estimate the initial inter-country input, inter-country use table flows, and then we can balance using the our numerical approaches. That's another data source used to create end-use categories bilateral trade database, and I can really skip this, and I have a 0 minute. Okay, and also I wanted to say that we have to also sometimes use beyond 6-digit trade statistics. It gives us a lot of really interesting phenomena like second-hand products or detailed end-use categories, which has, of course, certainly have a different roots of the value-added creation process if we export used car or if you export a new product. So that's our challenge to harmonize that. Okay. So I can end with our wish list. So it's really general that statistics at that time should be timely and nationally consistent for all data sources. And then detailed breakdowns are very welcome, even within the current framework, such as a detailed EBOBs classification or HS classification. Some countries are not able to provide even 6-digit HS data is really harmonized in, aggregated in 2-digit. So those are very welcome. And then the rest is our job to keep estimating in short term. So for the longer term, we will have a discussion in this afternoon too, and following panel. So that, thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Another example of OECD's capable and detailed leadership in this area of value-added accounts. Okay, so we have a little time for discussion of this as we get down to nitty-gritty details. Then we're going to go to, don't worry, we're going to go to the discussion. Okay, what do we have here? Comments? Questions? Well, you must have told them everything they needed to know. My wife was a teacher. She told me, always have wait time. All right, well, maybe you can bring it up as it occurs to you. And oh, I'm sorry, over here. Microphone's coming.
Say something about the balance process, the final balance. Because you have the slides there, but you skip them. Yeah. Okay, thank you.
It's difficult with slide, but So balancing starts from the national level. So as I said, we have to harmonize national figures at the total sector level. Value-added GDP output, those are first balanced, if you want to say that in the way. Then we go to sectoral constraints of value-added outputs and exports for each country. We sometimes see the strange numbers there. Then we have to redefine the exports of each country. We want to take out the re-export activities, re-import activities. That's another way how to balance. Then it comes to the sectoral exports balance, trade balance, that we work together with USITC G1. But how to go to that level to the final estimation procedures. There are some other approaches, I think, but basically what ideal way is to do the step by step. Finally, we get a nice harmonized. But we have to be also careful that country to country balance is also important. If we work too much on the sectoral balancing, sometimes we lose a lot of nicely harmonized country to country balancing situation, because sometimes we observe that the HS code or EBOPS code used in one country is different from what they use in the import side. So sometimes we have to be careful, really. We shouldn't really focus on sectoral balancing. So that's one thing we do.
You win.
Just a question, and whether in their considerations you very much focus on developing symmetric tables, but at the same time we have a group working on a handbook on supply and use table, and we talk about these multi-regional and global supply and use tables, is that they prefer to start using the supply and use table as they are. Now, I think that's an avenue that apparently has been explored and seemed to be feasible. Particularly so because with these symmetric tables, you make humongous adjustments in already, an environment of supply and use table where everything is not that perfect. So you add on the imperfections while making all these sort of adjustments. And it stays close to its official statistics. Have there been any consideration on your end in actually developing, the supply and use tables as the underlying sort of frames, and rather moving to the symmetric input-output tables, which I understand is not the way to go in the medium and long term?
Yeah, I perfectly understand your question. Due to the time constraint, I really skipped the balancing part. But actually, we do estimate the balanced international use imports table, which is a part of a supply use framework. Because of course, we know that the product dimension much better than the trade statistics to link the countries. Then, at the final stage, we have to have sort of a multiplier to estimate the TiVA indicators. So what I mean here, inter-country ICIO, is what we need to estimate for the TiVA indicators. So to estimate ICIO model or ICIO table, we need a global SUT framework, and global framework needs trade statistics and the national use table, and also there we need a national input-output tables, because many countries, they publish the basic price information only in the symmetric input-output system. So it's not just what we really need is all sort of data available in the countries.
Yeah, well, the devil is clearly in the details in this process.
I have last short question.
Oh, keep it real short, because we got to get on to the group
They have
discussion.
options, you say. I don't know what the final decision OECD made, because you say you can have a residual columns in the global supply use table final. Also, you can balance them, eliminate them, make a perfect balanced table. So which way finally go? Because I'm not sure. What is the final decision? What is the November release?
Yes. I think there are some issues, of course, for the discrepancies. If we only focus on discrepancy in the exports or trade figures, because we want, as I said, we want to keep what countries publish in the national accounts. That's our starting point. So if we add all countries and exports, all countries imports, we often see that exports are higher. I know there might be some cargo ships lost or the smuggling, whatever. So there are some reasons, but if we want to keep the published trade balances, we must have some sort of a discrepancy. It can be absorbed in the rest of the world economy, or it can be in this extra column. So, but anyway, we will at the end can go back to the national.
So finally, is, in the new table, you don't have the discrepancy column. That means people get to the table, they can directly invert. Or
for the users, it doesn't really matter because if it's in the export discrepancy column or exports, that column is included in the rest of the world. It's rest of the world is not unknown economy, which we.
Oh, that means the rest of the world as a residual, similar to YAD, right?
Not exactly same, but we can discuss.
Maybe we better take
yeah,
this offline.
technical
Yeah,
things.
these are actually all very important issues, and I just say, hopefully, it's part of an evolution because right now it may be palatable for everyone to keep the trade figures as they are, the official statistics, and do these one-off analytical products. But hopefully, as you discover and learn things about your trade statistics, you'll be able to follow some of the things that Canada and the United States have been able to in terms of actually not only reconciling them, but then coming to a common figure you're able to publish. And hopefully that's part of this process, because otherwise it's just about the new trade and value-added statistics as opposed to trying to improve the core statistics and these new statistics. Okay, so let's wrap that up and get to our, thank you very much, and get to our group discussion, which is a lot of people up here. If you could all come up. Let's see, to try and keep this manageable, I'm going to ask you all to sort of try and do about 3 to 5 minutes of your key points, because if we say 5 times, because we've got one from Canada from the floor, so we got 6, so we got